Nebraska did not, in fact, get blown out by Ohio State, but did they miss an opportunity? We'll talk about it when we begin the show.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making a Locked On Nebraska your first listen today and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Okay, welcome in. It is Monday morning. Hello, I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is here with me. We're back. Ohio State beat Nebraska 21-17 on Saturday at the Horseshoe, just like we all saw, Connor. I think we all had this going down to the wire. Nebraska had a chance to win the game with a possession, taking the ball, 3:43 left. Man, it was electric down there on the field. I was standing in the south end zone where Nebraska started from about the 20, and those final few minutes were wild. There was stuff being thrown out of the stands. The cheerleaders were running for cover. I was fine.
Were you hit by cheese or anything like that?
The cheese landed near me. The empty plastic fireball bottle landed near me. I was perhaps just because of my own stupidity. I was never at any point did I feel scared. It was kind of comical to see the cheerleaders like sprinting for the tunnel. They were behind the group of media who were standing down there in the corner of that end zone. I mean, look, you could have got hit by like a full container of beer or liquor, and that would have been very problematic. Right. But I think at that point, the way the game had gone for most Ohio State fans, those containers were empty. They were doing lots of drinking as the second half wore on. It was an unexpected day in Columbus, Ohio. Connor, I thought that if Nebraska was going to be in this game, and I did not expect Nebraska to be in this game. I don't think that we expected Nebraska to be in this game based on the predictions that we made Friday. Ohio State was going to just have to fall all over itself and open the door for Nebraska. We're talking multiple turnovers that Nebraska capitalized and scored points from, really just like errors that Ohio State made. And that's not what it was. Ohio State turned it over one time. Nebraska did not score off that turnover, and which is we'll get to. But this was a game that Nebraska went toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in college football, maybe the most talented team in college football, and held its own for 60 minutes.
Yeah. The hope is that a result, even though it's not a positive result, and there's still some things in there where it's like, dang, Nebraska could have and should have won this game. So you leave with a little bit of disappointment, but hopefully it's a performance that Matt Rule could show his team and he could say, hey, look, you guys can do this. You know, it's positive reinforcement. And Rule touched on that and plenty more topics after the game on Saturday in Columbus. But you're right. They met the physical challenge. They met the execution challenge. They were just probably not explosive enough. And that was kind of it. That was kind of the difference in the game. It didn't finish off, one or two drives and made one or two mistakes. And that was sort of it. But as far as you look at a football game in a more like worldly view, global view, Nebraska had every bit of a chance to win that game, and they deserved it. I only briefly thought, all right, they're going to actually do this thing, but that's sometimes how you have to do it against Ohio State. You do have to go take it from them. Nebraska didn't do that. But it was an excellent bounce back from that disaster of an Indiana game the week before.
You make a good point about the explosive nature of these teams and the explosive plays. So Ohio State only had explosive plays in this game. Buckeyes scored on a 40-yard pass to Carnell Tate, from Will Howard to Carnell Tate, on a 60-yard pass to Jeremiah Smith that looked frighteningly easy. Like after that play, it looked to me like, well, they should just run that play every play, and they'll score every play. It was a bust in coverage, but even with that, Isaac Gifford trailing the big freshman Jeremiah Smith, it was not a matchup that Nebraska at any point wants, and it was over before it started. But Ohio State couldn't go back to it because Nebraska was getting pressure on Will Howard because they were doing a nice job with the corners and locking up Smith. I think Nebraska maybe threw him some things or confused him a little bit. We were reminded that he's a freshman. To the fact that he only broke free in the secondary and was able to connect. The quarterback was able to connect with him one time is a credit to Tony White and John Butler and what Nebraska did in pass coverage. And then for Nebraska, and then there was a 38-yard pass to Tate right after Nebraska took the lead 17-14 in the fourth quarter that initiated the Buckeyes' only drive, their only drive that did anything in the entire second half, and that was the winning touchdown drive. So 3 explosive plays for Ohio State. As Matt Rule said, they stopped them the rest of the game. The run game was not there. Travion Henderson could not get loose. I mean, from the very beginning of the game when Jamari Butler smashed him, or no, it was MJ Sherman smashed him, Henderson, who's going to be a good NFL running back in the backfield on fourth down. Quinshawn Judkins, Ohio State's other running back, could not get loose. They couldn't get it in the short pass game. And then for Nebraska, the explosive plays, well, it was Dylan Raiola running 38 yards through the middle of the field to get into scoring range, which was surreal to see considering what his plan. It's not that he doesn't have any mobility. It's that he hasn't used it for the first 7 games. And the other explosives were from John Hohl.
I guess you could count those as explosives. Yeah.
54-yard field goal at the end of the first half. That's an explosive play. It's Gus Johnson thought it was explosive.
Oh yeah, he sure did. It sounded that way as well. They did some good stuff in the run game though. Like they creased a couple, not, for 50 and 60 yards, but for 15, pretty consistently. They hit a couple big plays in the pass game, probably a couple more that would have been in the pass game with some pass interferences and things like that. So it was, we're gonna nitpick all this week, and we're gonna be talking a lot about the Nebraska screen game, which they may be a little heavily reliant on at this point in time. But outside of that, it was a pretty good plan to be able to beat a team that is definitely more talented than you. But Nebraska had a winning formula in that game, and that's a lot of the picture. That's a lot of what matters.
Yeah, when we get into the show, deeper into the show, we'll talk about what Matt Rule said after the game and how Nebraska handles this moving forward. I do want to spend a couple more minutes here talking about the specific game, since this is the first time that we've been with you. And sorry for that. We plan to have some reaction on site while I was still in Columbus. Busy weekends, early travel. Connor, I was up at 3 a.m. Central Time on Sunday, getting ready to head back to the Midwest. And you had basketball responsibilities at Creighton and Nebraska this weekend. So while we're here with you for the first time, this is kind of like our Monday show. Matt Rule will talk to the media today on Monday around noon, and it's our reaction show. So one thing that we should bring up, and this is discussed much by Nebraska fans, it was over the weekend. And sometimes I hesitate to go down this road because I feel like you can do it every single week.
Not today.
You're shaking your head at me. You're shaking your head like you want to discuss it. Okay.
This should be the main topic. And what you're about to say is officiating. The officiating was so bad. I mean, I have a log that, just every time I thought the officials either inserted themselves too much or there was just a whole bunch of stuff. It was
this log over multiple games.
No, I did it specifically for this one because I thought it warranted it. And I felt like it did. So
you're going to be spending a good amount of time on your show today on 1620 discussing the stripes.
Yes, the ref log. I'm generally with you. Like I don't think we need to have this conversation all the time, but my God, I mean, offensive pass interference calls where there's just, pretty normal contact. We had the whole fiasco with was it a catch or was it a fumble plus the targeting. Was it a targeting? Was it not a targeting? Then immediately followed by Ryan Day exploding on the sideline, warranting an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, not getting it, and getting instead like a sideline warning, like, hey, you had too many people on the field, everybody get back, just a little warning. That should have been an unsportsmanlike conduct foul that should have moved Nebraska into Ohio State territory with a chance to take the lead with less than 2 minutes to go. And it didn't. It didn't end there.
Day bumped into the official on that, which to me is an automatic 15-yarder. So that was right in front of me. And I thought, okay, so I'm watching the big board in the stadium as they review the hit that was called targeting against an Ohio State linebacker on Jamal Banks. And I thought, oh, that's not targeting. I was not so much thinking about the contact to the head or neck with a shoulder or an elbow, which is what it was. So in getting back to the press box and after the game and looking at that play again, I thought, okay, I can understand why they called it targeting. Ryan Day was in the same mindset as me, apparently, because he went crazy, as we've all seen, as soon as the official explained that as targeting. And right as soon as he made contact with the official who was standing behind him, and Day jumped up and he didn't see him, but he made contact with him, that flag came out. So I don't know how that's a sideline warning as much as it is. You can't make contact with an official.
Unsportsmanlike conduct. That's unsportsmanlike conduct. And then 2 really egregious errors in spotting the football in crucial moments. I mean, clock is winding down at the end of the first half. And Nebraska's got an easy first down, like easy by a yard and a half by Emmett Johnson. And apparently the official was looking at the wrong person, spotted it short. Clock continues to run, and it cost Nebraska a whole bunch of time.
30 seconds.
And
a couple throws to the end zone.
Exactly. And then you get an offensive pass interference that briefly moves him out of field goal range before John Hohl saves your butt. And then the other one on spotting the ball was down near the goal line that ended up with Dante Dowdell trying to jump for basically 5 yards over everybody. Now he's got to stay on his feet and he's got to take the right path to the end zone there. But if the ball was spotted in the correct place, he's in. Then they do that exact thing. He's in the end zone. So
well, we'll come back after the break. I have something I want to say about that play, and it's not necessarily all that flattering for the Nebraska coaches. So when we come back, we'll address that, and then we'll move on to what this game means in the big picture for the Huskers.
Hey, we're good and fired up about officials. Let's talk about the FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. You can't wager on what will happen with officials unless it's something very specific for like the Super Bowl or something like that. But you can indeed bet on whichever game you'd like to, whether it's the NFL, college football with the FanDuel Sportsbook. And you could even do so live in the middle of a game. I saw the live line for Nebraska and Ohio State got way, way down during the middle of that thing. So if you have a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check it out on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And we want to get you started the right way. If you place your first $5 bet, you're getting $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Once again, place that first $5 bet and $200 in bonus bets are coming your way. That's at FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we are back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman. Connor Happer, 1620 The Zone. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Let's finish the thought there on the drive. Nebraska gets an interception from Malcolm Hartzog. They're officially turning the tables of the football game, and they have first and goal on the 7-yard line, and Nebraska can't get any points out of it.
Okay, so a couple thoughts. One, Nebraska ran 2 plays into the line of scrimmage, conservative play calls to Dowdell. I think it should have just ran 1. If you're in 4-down territory and you have something that you want to use down there on the goal line, which was the sweep to, was it Lloyd? It was Lloyd, I believe.
Lloyd. Yeah.
And you want to use that, and Matt Rule said they thought they were going to get in on that play, then don't wait till 3rd down to call that. Go ahead and call it on 2nd down. So you have 2 more chances and you can throw the ball if necessary. I thought they took their time getting to third down, and it was basically a wash the first 2 plays. There was nothing positive.
True.
So you're 3rd and 7, and you're up against it. So Lloyd does, and that's fine. Like, that thing's easy to second guess, and Dowdell could have pounded 3 yards both times he touched the ball from the 7, and then they're 3rd and 1, fine. But Lloyd gets it, and he gets down to what Matt Rule thought was inside the 1. It was okay. It was right. I have not gone back and studied that play, but Rule's perspective from the sideline, he said, where he saw the official run in and spot it, was at the inside the 1. So immediately they go 4th down. Don't hold back. Let's go with the big heavy package. Ty Robinson comes in at fullback. Mazuka's in, I believe, as an extra offensive lineman. You have Janiron Bonner there as like a second fullback, and Dowdell in the backfield. So this is as heavy as a look as Nebraska can show. And it's a dive over the top. Only the problem is when the ball's actually spotted before the play, it's at the 2-yard line. So you lose maybe 4 or 5 feet. At that point, this is my criticism. Somebody in the press box among the Nebraska coaches needs to be on the headset talking to Matt Rule and say, this is not where we think the spot is. He needs to be talking to the officials to stop that thing. Call a timeout. He said he didn't want to use a timeout there because of the situation in the game. No, that's 6 points, 7 points that is there for you. You don't want to lose that. I get it. If you miss the 4th down, they're going to have to punt out of their end zone. Ultimately, you may turn that into something, but no, take the touchdown, get the touchdown, do whatever it takes to get the touchdown. If you have to challenge the spot, whatever. And, Dowdell ends up having to jump from about 10 feet behind the outside of the end zone. And just, he's not going to jump that far.
I think the bigger criticism, I agree with you, by the way, Mitch, like, take your time. It was the same thing with the Emmett Johnson play where he didn't get the spot before. Like, somebody's got to get on there and say, hey, look, we didn't get what we wanted.
Yeah, coach is upstairs. Satterfield's upstairs. Like, other coaches are upstairs.
So no doubt about it. That's absolutely true. But I thought the bigger crime on that play was just Dowdell jumping. Like, I just stay on your feet.
He jumped too early. Yeah.
He jumped too early. He didn't need to jump at all. Just like, take the handoff, evaluate your situation, and turns out that he could have ran into the end zone in Lincoln if he just ran left a little bit. Yeah. Or if that was a keeper for, on a naked boot for Raiola or something like that. Like, I don't know that those are plays, things that you could change like on the fly, but maybe Rule says to him before the play, hey, look, like, just remember, you don't have to jump. Now, he did get a touchdown later jumping, but it was from closer, and he went over the pile.
That was the way that the 4th down play was supposed to go. A little bit different on first and goal from the 1/4-yard line, as the officials called it on the stadium mic.
Yeah.
That was costly. That was costly, and Ohio State didn't get anywhere after the turnover on downs. It punted back to Nebraska. Huskers then were unable to convert. They had the ball at the 32-yard line, and Raiola hit or had Banks open for what would have been a touchdown and overthrew him, and then was sacked on 3rd down. Nebraska had to punt. It eventually got the ball back in scoring range or in position to go down and score, but 2 missed opportunities. Really, it's just 1 missed opportunity because the second one came as a result of the first missed opportunity, but still, Nebraska could have taken the lead much earlier in that game. And, maybe Ohio State has an answer offensively for whatever Nebraska does. I mean, I kind of feel like the Buckeyes were likely going to do enough to win that game, but Nebraska had to cash in. And I feel like there was some strategical misplay in addition to the terrible spot multiple times and the DPI, the OPI stuff from the officiating crew was brutal.
They eventually got the pressure on Ohio State, but I think you mentioned something before, and when you were down in the field and trying to avoid cheese and empty fireball shooters, like when things are not going well for that team, it turns into, and you saw it expressed in the Ryan Day should have been a 15-yard penalty. Like, it is a gigantic pressure cooker. So if you're playing them at home, and Ohio State's at home, you need to put as much pressure on them all the time as you possibly can, because their fans were outwardly booing after one of the 3-and-out drives. I mean, Nebraska got like 5 of them, I think, on the day, 3-and-out drives.
Yeah.
They were outwardly booing. They were just like, I can't take this anymore. This is horrible. So the more pressure you put on that team, the better chance you have for success, because it is an internal pressure cooker, big time.
Amazing environment. Ohio Stadium, the modern Ohio Stadium. The first time I saw it was in 1999 when I was there as a young Cub reporter for NCAA regional baseball, and walked in or saw it from the outside. And 25 years later, that thing is it puts NFL stadiums to shame. It's a different level of, I think you expect that if you go to Alabama. I think Texas has that kind of environment, that kind of infrastructure. It is an impressive game day environment, not just in the stadium, but outside the stadium. The amount of manpower and infrastructure and security and everything that goes on as you're driving up to that place is by itself intimidating. And with that comes this ridiculous amount of entitlement from Ohio State fans.
Definitely.
You're playing a Big Ten game. This is not Marshall that Ohio State was playing. Like, if in today's college football, I realize Ohio State has a $20 million roster, but in today's college football, if you're in a Big Ten game and you win, I don't care if you're a 25.5-point favorite. This is the world moving forward in college football. You are happy to win a Big Ten game. Look, if Ohio State's playing Purdue in a few weeks and it's struggling, I can understand some booing. But and I know Nebraska has not been the old Nebraska, but this is not a terrible Nebraska. This is not a bad Nebraska team. Like, Ohio State fans were not happy with what was happening, and it exhibits a huge amount of entitlement. A quick story. So I'm on my flight home on Sunday, and I stop in Minneapolis, Columbus to Minneapolis, and then to Omaha. And I get off the plane with all the people who are exiting from Columbus, and I stopped at a coffee shop right by my gate, and there was a couple decked out in Ohio State gear, and they're talking to the barista, and she said, "Oh, did you go to the game?" And they shook their heads and said, "Yeah, it was the most terrible game I've ever seen." And they're connecting that perhaps overseas from listening to them talk. So they had apparently invested a lot into coming to see Ohio State on this fourth Saturday in October. The most terrible game I've ever seen. We should get our money back. And I'm kind of standing there going, you just saw a good competitive I almost wanted to talk to them, like, from a objective standpoint. Like, you understand that Nebraska's a real team too. You don't get to just win 42-0 against other teams in the Big Ten. I didn't say anything, but that's where Ohio State fans are at. Many of them are at. You got that sense during the game.
And I think it's great. It's a great, sort of view of college football too. Like, legendary coaches go away, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, and things change around you in college football with NIL and the transfer portal and all this stuff, and the conferences move around you. This is life now. This is life for those schools now. Like, they have to sort of get used to it, and so it might not be comfortable losing to Vanderbilt or beating Nebraska by 4 on your home field, but you better get used to it, and you better be happy for every win you could possibly get.
Yeah, going 15-0 or 16-0 in the college football playoff system now is akin to doing that, or almost akin to doing that, I'd say, in the NFL, where it just doesn't happen. Like, this is and it's only going to get more pronounced in going in that direction as we move forward.
Agreed. We'll take a break, come back, final segment coming up. We'll talk about some of the things that Matt Rule had to say, and we'll take a look at the week ahead. Coming back on the Locked On Nebraska podcast.
All right, I want to take a minute to tell you about GameTime, because it's late in the college football season. November is here. Halloween is here. Happy Halloween. It's here this week, which means that we're getting serious about some big-time college football going on. In baseball, we could be down to the very end. The World Series is headed back to New York. Pennant races are over. But you should get excited about GameTime, because if you've got a football game that you want to see in person, GameTime is going to make that experience much easier. Why? Because prices go down on the app the closer you get to kickoff. wherever you want to go late this fall, basketball, football games, concerts. If it's a hot ticket, it's there on GameTime. I love that you can see flash deals, views from your seat. You can customize your spot in the stadium. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app today. GameTime, last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back on this Monday of UCLA week. Have we mentioned that Nebraska plays UCLA on Saturday? I think
we'll get to it.
This is the first reference to the UCLA Bruins coming off of a bye week into Lincoln Memorial Stadium Saturday. Bowl eligibility at stake for Nebraska. One thing I want to do today is promote our Friday show. So would like you all to come listen to us on Friday because we have a lot of fun and we pick the games and we pick the Nebraska props and such. So I want to quickly review because I feel like it's maybe more relevant to review this stuff on Monday than it is on Friday when we're getting ready to go into the next week.
Right.
So
what's the damage? How bad is it?
Yeah, so on the Nebraska stuff, we were even at 4-4. We both thought that Dylan Raiola was going to go over 29.5 pass attempts. He did. We both had Nebraska going under 4.9 yards per play. It did. We both had, and this is silly looking back at it, Ohio State going under 6.0 yards per carry. It did. We thought Heinrich Harburg was going to get the ball more than he did, so we were wrong there. We were wrong on Nebraska's leading receiver, which was Thomas Fidone. We were wrong about Nebraska kicking a field goal. We said no, it did 3 times. John Hohl, credit to John Hohl.
Hell yeah.
Turnover margin, we thought Nebraska would lose it. It was even. Really, it was a Nebraska win because actually, no, that was a legit turnover at the end of the game. Sorry, not a Hail Mary. And on Jeremiah Smith, we both win that because we had him catching a touchdown pass. You did get Nebraska to cover in this game. I did not, I said 45-14. That was embarrassingly wrong. Around the Big Ten, man, there were all these games where there were underdogs that we thought were attractive. Of the 8 games that we picked in the Big Ten and nationally, 7 of the 8 favorites won, including Notre Dame. And Notre Dame won 51-14. You had Navy winning that game outright. So, But in the Big Ten, UCLA covered at home, Indiana covered at home, Oregon covered at home as a big favorite against Illinois. That was surprising to me. And Penn State covered Wisconsin on the road. Penn State's looking very good as it prepares to play Ohio State this week. So in our bonus bet, I got it right. We asked how many points Oklahoma would score against Ole Miss. We had to be within 3. Sooners lost 26-14. So an offensive explosion from Oklahoma down in Oxford. I said 13. You said 7. So I get the bonus bet victory.
Good job.
All right. So we'll see. We'll see if people are still listening to the show after we went with that.
Hey,
I hope you are. I hope you stuck with us.
College football. There's the reason why we're not doing the college football podcast. We're doing the Nebraska podcast, right? Go listen.
Right. But we want you to listen to our Friday show when we talk about things all around the country too. So if you heard that and you like it, tune in on Friday. So how does this play, Connor? How's this gonna work? Can Nebraska just pick up where it left off, which is what Matt Rule wants, and now this is the standard of how Nebraska plays over the next 4 games?
It's a really good question. And I think, like I said, right at the top of the show, it could be a building block because Matt Rule can go back to his team. And he said this after the game on Saturday. He said, it better not look any different when we come and play UCLA or Iowa or Wisconsin or USC coming down the stretch here. Like, this is what you are capable of. And I think that's been the hardest thing to swallow all year for Nebraska fans, because you saw how inspired it was and how detailed it was against Colorado in that first half. And you saw how inspired and detailed it was now against Ohio State. And we've just seen little glimpses of the potential of what this team can sort of be, which is a really, really good team. Probably not undefeated or anything like that, but like it's a good team. But also they have these lapses. The Indiana game will now forever go in the Nebraska history books as an all-time WTF game. What happened on that Saturday? There might have to be a story or something like that. But yeah, I think you could build off of it and you could use it, but it's still to the point where I'm not sure I quite trust them yet. And I'm sure that'll be the topic of the week.
That's what I asked in my final post game column that posted on The Athletic on Sunday morning. Can you trust this Nebraska team? Because that's the big question for me. If you trust them, and there's not a game left on Nebraska's schedule that it can't win. This last Saturday, that was as tough as it gets, easily. That's the most difficult game. When Nebraska goes to the Coliseum in LA on November 16th, it's not going to be in that kind of an environment, anywhere close to that kind of an environment. It may be 50-50, well, not 50-50, like 70-30 USC to Nebraska fans in that game, and it's going to be nothing like the atmosphere that the Huskers saw. They can win that game.
% full too.
Yeah, right. Nebraska can win that game. Nebraska can beat UCLA this Saturday. Nebraska can beat Wisconsin at home, and Iowa is not unbeatable. So, although it has been in recent history against Nebraska, the last time the Huskers went to Iowa City, they won. So, here's what I want to look at. Twice in the previous 4 games against Ohio State, something similar to this has happened. This is not a one-off. Nebraska played Ohio State twice since 4 times since 2018 before Saturday, and 2 of the games went kind of like this. So in 2018, which was Scott Frost's first year, Ohio State won at the Horseshoe 36-31. It was a great day for Adrian Martinez, the true freshman quarterback. So there's the parallel there. 36-31, Ohio State escapes, and Nebraska, of course, takes momentum forward from that, and then goes and destroys Illinois the next week in Lincoln, beats Michigan State in a 9-6 game the week after that in Lincoln, and loses 31-28 to finish the season against a good Iowa team. So it very much did capitalize on the momentum and the confidence that it gained at Ohio State on that day in 2020 and 2018. In 2021, little bit different story. This is when Nebraska's losing everything by 1 score, and things are circling the drain for Scott Frost. Ohio State came into Memorial Stadium, and Nebraska put up a better fight than I think a lot of people expected. 26-17 was the final that day. Huskers followed that up with a bye week, and then went and lost by 7 at Wisconsin and by 7 at home against Iowa. So couldn't turn that into more victories. So can this team do it? Can this team be 2018?
I will say this, that 21 game was a little bit closer to the type of game that you were describing earlier, where like they got CJ Stroud threw for 400 yards in that game, but Nebraska got a couple turnovers. Okay. And they kind of just stayed at arm's length the entire way.
So your thinking is that one didn't have as much potential to generate energy and momentum for Nebraska because it was more they were allowed to stick around.
Correct. That's exactly right. So 18, you could really say, hey, look, man, I know we haven't won a game yet because I don't think they had won by that.
They had beaten Bethune-Cookman and Minnesota before that. Yeah.
Right. So like it was
big wins.
They were in trouble, and it was like, hey, we could do this. And then they started playing some really, really good football toward the end of the season. So maybe you take that same thing and you build off of it here.
Yeah, and the scenario is much more similar to 2018 than it is to 2021 because the 2018 game was on the road against with a true freshman quarterback early in a coach's regime, as opposed to 2021, which was things were winding down for Scott Frost at that point. So I think that can happen. That's very much what Rule is looking at. He was philosophical after the game. He didn't want to leave the stage. Keith Mann, Nebraska's media relations director, was, as they do on road games, was trying to move things along and said one more question for coach, and Rule said, no, I want to answer them all today. So he did that last year against Colorado after that difficult loss, and this was the first time he's done something like that since then. So he wanted to stick up there and talk, and he gave long, detailed answers. He said he thought the team grew up. He said he thought it was the first time they'd played championship level football since his arrival. He talked about building something sustainable and why he does things different than other coaches who've come through Lincoln. There was a lot to swallow. There was a lot to think about, and it'll be interesting to see where Matt Rule's at on this Monday when he gets back in front of the media in Lincoln.
Yeah, maybe a little less emotional, but still definitely believing in the direction of things. All right, that's it for us today on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Appreciate this being your first listen. We got a second listen all lined up for you. It's the Locked On College Football podcast. Maybe Spencer's a little bit better at picks than we are. You can go check him out, and the link is in the description to this show. That's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.